Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
I'm Christian Steven.M.Greer. You're watching Disclosures of the Third Kind. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Disclosures of the Third Kind. You're listening to me, Christian Steven.M.Greer. Today is going to be a special episode. Well, I say special episode, it will just be another episode, but kind of special because this is a topic that's close to my heart. This is one of my favourite cases, and it's the Aztec UFO case. So straight out of the drawer of my cases, my imaginary drawer, I'm looking at Aztec, 25th of March 1948. Let's go back to that. Got my trusty typed up notes here, but we won't need those because I know this case like the back of my hand. I've looked at it enough. So 25th of March 1948. What's going on? So the first thing that really happens that's reported is a rancher by the name of Valentin Archuleta working out near Aztec, or I should say near the mesa, which is where the disc came down. He sees, or he looks up and he sees a strange looking disc, really, if we describe it as flying saucer disc, hovering in the sky, or it looks like it's struggling. It sort of scratches against a part of the, or comes down and sort of touches down on part of a mesa, goes back up again, looks like it's doing okay, and carries on for a little while and then comes back down again. That's what he witnessed, or he witnessed the struggling part of it. He reports this, and the next thing is, once the saucer had come down on the 25th, it's about, well, I'd say about 11:30 in the morning, we've got oil field workers who are called out to the site quite early. I would say the oil field workers would have got out there a little bit earlier than 11:30, or it's stated in Frank Scully's book and Scott Ramsey's research that it was about that time. So we don't know exactly, but we know it's about around between, I'd say, 7 to 11:30, about that time. So a chap by the name of Doug Nolan is sent out with his boss. His boss's name will come back to me in a minute, but there was plenty of people that came forward in the early 2000s, thanks to Scott Ramsey, who confirmed their passage at the site, or their time at the site. They said yes, they were there, yes, those other people were there too. Yeah, and this is what we saw. So they were a little bit shocked when they got out there. So Doug Nolan and his boss, once they were out there, are expecting to see a small brush fire, which is what they were called out there for. But when they got there, they saw some of the boys who were already up there, or these oil field workers. Another one of them was Glenn Pace, I believe was his name. And that's thanks to Scott Ramsey. Glenn Pace, who confirmed he was there too, said it's not this brush fire that you want to see here. It's what's up on top of that mesa. So lo and behold, Doug Nolan and his boss have to go and look, don't they? When they get up on top of the mesa, they're shocked to see what looks like about 100 foot, or it's said in Frank Scully's book to be about 99.9 feet in diameter, this disc. We don't know the sizing, but we'd say between 99.9 and 100 foot. That's what's stated, and that's what the witnesses saw. That's what Doug Nolan, Glenn Pace, these witnesses had stated they'd seen, that this disc was around about 90 to 100 foot. So they get there, Glenn Pace, Doug Nolan. I believe there was some oilfield workers already climbing up on it, trying to get on into it by the looks of it. There's a small porthole, or there was portholes around the top. So imagine a flying saucer that you've got, and you've got a dome on the top, which is what it was, and there's portholes around this dome. One of these portholes has got a crack, probably about pencil width is what's described by Doug Nolan and Glenn Pace. He says that one of the oil field workers went to go and get a pole to try and jam it into this crack, because when they looked inside of this porthole, they could see alien bodies, similar to my friend up here, grey alien bodies that looked burnt. They were more brownish, which was described by the witness. They were brownish in colour, and Frank Scully's book as well. He says they have perfect teeth in his book, but I don't know about that part. That Scott Ramsey said that some of Frank Scully's book did hit bang on the money, and other parts I think were either disinformation or slight fabrications. But we know that the beings, thanks to Doug Nolan, Glenn Pace, and the witnesses who were there, were about 3 to 4 feet tall. And if you've read the FBI hotel memorandum, keep calling them hotel memorandum, you'll see that in the memorandum it states 3 discs had come down in New Mexico with small beings wearing silver tight-fitting suits, 3 to 4 feet in height, which is about right. This is what Doug Nolan and Glenn Pace and the other witnesses are describing. You've got beings 3 to 4 feet in height inside this craft, slumped over the control panel by the looks of things from what they're telling. So yeah, there is that. And the names came back to me. So Doug Nolan, Bill Ferguson was Doug Nolan's boss. That was his name. So you've got Bill Ferguson, Doug Nolan, you've got Glenn Pace. There's some witnesses there already who have testified to oath that yes, what I saw, dead beings. They were wearing tight silver fitting suits, exactly as is described in the Guy Hotel memorandum. That's thanks to Scott Ramsey again for his research, and Bill Steinman as well. He's not mentioned often. Bill Steinman did some fantastic research on the Aztec UFO case. His book came out in 1986. Highly sought after, by the way. It was only 1,000 copies ever sold, but if you find it, do buy it, because it's a brilliant book. So yes, there is that. So we've got Doug Nolan, Bill Ferguson, Glenn Pace all describing what they're seeing. They said once they jammed, these oil field workers had jammed the pole into the small hole in the porthole, they managed to hit some type of button or control knob or something, and a hatch opened up for them. I think it was on the outside of the disc or either the porthole. I'm not sure exactly how that opened, but I'm pretty sure from what Scott Ramsey said in his research that one of these, a door sort of just flung open. They were able to get inside and see what was bizarre to them. It must have been Star Trek age, alien inspired, like the Alien 1979 film. That's what I'm trying to imagine here. Or something as described by Bob Lazar, swivel seats, bucket seats, future age technology. This is what's described by Frank Scully in his book. This is what's described by Doug Nolan, Bill Ferguson, and Glenn Pace. They all describe the same thing. It was just futuristic technology, swivel bucket seats, and it was quite crowded in there too. So if you were quite tall, presumably these beings were only 3 to 4 feet tall, and this disc would have been accommodated for them inside. So it was quite hard to, you had to duck in to get in. So that was really interesting. So that's the case we've got so far. The military then arrive on site I would assume not long after. The first sign of the military showing up is at one of the newer helicopters for 1948. That was the first one they'd seen. I think they were more stunned by the helicopter than they were anything else, because they'd never seen one before. So the first helicopter was actually invented in about September 1947. So they weren't flying long. By March 1948, prototypes and the very first helicopters were flying. It was a small 2-seater type. The name of I think it was the HC-3 it was that was flying at that time, but they said they saw it overhead, and I think the attention went from the disc to see what that was. But the military had found the site, and troops had come in via a road that had been cut. I think it cut in the 1800s. I can't remember the name of the road, but it had been there a long time. I think Carl Flock tried to argue that road was never there. Actually, this stretch of road had been there throughout basically the Wild West period in the 1800s that was put in to get there. So it was very interesting to get to the top of this mesa. And if you watch Scott Ramsey's video on the Aztec UFO crash in 2004, it's fascinating. He goes out to the site, he finds a concrete block that was most likely used by a crane to get up onto, and then to pick up the disc. Or from what Scott Ramsey's done through his research, he's found out that the disc came apart in 4 sections. This is how the military and the scientists, Carl A. Hyland was one of the scientists who leaked this information to Frank Scully, by the way. There was 8 scientists in total. He calls them Dr. G in his book. But these 8 scientists, Carl A. Hyland being one of them, assisted in working out how to take this thing apart, because it would have baffled the minds 100%. You're looking at something that extraterrestrial technology that's the first time on Earth, or the second time if you count Roswell, and what the hell is this thing? So that they would have had a team of scientists, most likely over from Roswell, what happened with the Roswell crash, and Wright-Patterson, taken to Wright-Patterson, studying the material, like the strange metal that we've talked about in previous episodes. They would have had the similar scientists that were working on that come out to the disc. So Carl A. Hyland was one of them. So it was really interesting. So there is that. From what I gather, a new road had to be, or a new stretch of path had to be cut or dug in by the military to get this disc out in different parts. The M15 Dragon Wagon military truck was used at that point. They had them at different various bases in New Mexico. They were like World War II surplus. They were great during the Second World War to haul Sherman tanks, M4 Sherman tanks, etc. So that worked for the disc, but it had to be taken in stages and then taken on to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The whole recovery, according to Scott Ramsey, took about 2 weeks. This is thanks to the witnesses. Again, I think a couple of the military witnesses said they did a great clean-up, because after the disc had been removed, obviously the witnesses at this point had all been sworn to secrecy. Crypto's decided to fall over and hit me on the head. Thank you very much. After these witnesses had been sworn to secrecy, that was it. The information wasn't getting out. Whatever was leaked to Frank Scully came from the scientists, which he labels as Dr. G. Then they sought to discredit Frank Scully's story. Nobody would touch behind the flying saucers after 1953. That's thanks to J.P. Kahn, who wanted the case, but we'll go into that in a minute. Won't muddy the waters here, but so you've got that. You've got the military cleanup that took 2 weeks. You've got a witness who came out in the early 2000s that said, yes, this was one of the best crash retrievals that they'd done. They didn't botch it like Roswell. Those were quote unquote words that were said in the interview between Scott Ramsey and this other witness. He said that the team consisted of about 200 people at the site. Now, Scott Ramsey did a dig at the site and found K-ration cans, so things that were there to suggest that there was military action there, which is really interesting. And it's the same with the concrete slab. He said it's a very strange spot for it to be. They did a test on the concrete slab to test its age, and it came from the late 40s. It wasn't a well cap or anything. It was most likely there to help the crane pick up the pieces of the saucer and put it onto the M15 Dragon Wagon. So that was interesting as well. So yes, once it was hauled onto the M15 Dragon Wagons, basically a trail or a path had to be cut for these Dragon Wagons to get these pieces of the saucer out, which they did. The cleanup, he said, after that took about a week or so, I think it was. They said it was one of the best jobs they did. Like I said, they didn't botch it like Roswell. Anybody who was at the crash site, the names or the mentions in correspondence or anything after the fact was removed, or they were basically said, yeah, they were on holiday or they were at the dentist or they were doing this. So if anybody looked into it, or anybody tries to look into it now, it would just reflect that, no, well, he was, if any of these witnesses had come out too and said, like they have, and said, hey, I was there on their paperwork it reflect, no, you were at the dentist, or you were on holiday in Los Angeles, or such and such. So it was done very well to discredit the witnesses. So they knew they couldn't keep the lid down 100%, but by discrediting the witnesses and removing any paper trail of these witnesses being there, if they talked, well, there's no problem, because it couldn't be proved that they were there anyway. So there's that too. I find Aztec fascinating. Again, I think Frank Scully said there was 16 to 18 beings in the craft in total. I don't know about that many. Again, if you read the Guy Hotel memorandum, each flying disc had about 4 beings in it. So I would assume it was anywhere between 4 and 6. That's what the witnesses said. That's what Scott Ramsey said through his research. I would tend to lean more that it was 4 to 6. Again, you don't know that Frank Scully didn't get disinformation along with the real information. So there is that too. Frank Scully releases his book in September 1950 after the information is brought to him by 2 men named Silas Mason Newton and Leo Gebauer. These are 2 wealthy oil businessmen doing very well around the Aztec area. I'm assuming that these 8 scientists, they wanted to get the story out. They believed it would be leaked in a year, not knowing the secrecy that would shroud the UFO topic or anything to do with UFOs. They assumed that this story would be leaked to the public anyway. So they would have gone to these 2 men, Silas Mason Newton and Leo Gebauer, with this information, because they were known around the area. They were big wigs in the area, so if there was any information to be leaked, it could be leaked through big businessmen and then on to somewhere else. So that's what they did. The 8 scientists came to Silas Mason Newton, Leo Gebauer. From there on, the information goes to Frank Scully. Frank Scully was like the Joe Rogan of the time, let's say, or a big name. He was the Hollywood columnist, basically. So you'd go to him to get anything put out in the press, and he did that. But he took the story and ran with it and made a book. First an article in 1949, then a book September 1950. But we have a problem. We've got a big problem. J.P. Kahn, he was a columnist for the San Francisco Tribune, I believe it was, or something like that. He was very interested in the story. What J.P. Kahn wanted was the story off Scully. He thought there was something to the flying saucers, and said, yeah, okay, I'm on with this, and this story's fascinating. I want the story from you. Offers him $25,000. Frank Scully's like, nope, I'm not selling this story for any money. This story's for me, and I'm putting this out in my book, Behind the Flying Saucers. This would annoy J.P. Kahn big time. He then sought to discredit Frank Scully's story in any way he could. He found what he deemed to be a little bit of dirt on Silas Mason Newton and Leo Gebauer through their doodlebug device. Now, if anybody who hasn't watched my previous episode, or my 2 episodes before with Caleb Waller, we talked about the doodlebug device then, only briefly, mind you. The doodlebug is an interesting thing. So they claim that this doodlebug, it was an oil detecting device, could find oil, but it was using something different to other doodlebugs. Was using alien technology from the Aztec crash. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know. But there's a lot of evidence to suggest that it was using some strange technology. Again, I haven't got the doodlebug device in my hand, so I can't say for definite. But what's interesting about this is when this went to court, he couldn't find a single witness who said, no, the doodlebug's terrible. It's awful. I've spent how many $1,000s on this, is not working for me. Everybody said, no, I'm happy with Silas Mason and Leo Gebauer's device. No problem with me. One chap, however, felt a bit disgruntled, or I think he was pushed to feel disgruntled with his doodlebug device, and said, no, it's not finding anything for me. So J.P. Kahn's got his man. He hits onto the FBI and says, you need to be investigating these 2, which the FBI, it's obviously come to their desk. It's illuminated for them. They're now looking into it. You've got this going to court. This man with his doodlebug, who's very annoyed, feel like he's been ripped off. He's been conned. No judge would touch this case. J.P. Kahn pleaded with all the judges and nobody would touch it until about 1952. 52 or 53 when it was brought to a judge, and they said, okay, under duress, they went, right, well, let's take this further. They did. The witness came forward with his doodlebug. Wasn't the same doodlebug, mind you. It was a surplus doodlebug from another place that was left over from the war or something, from what it says in the article. So there's that, and then you've got this surplus doodlebug in the trial of J.P. Khan, of Silas Mason Newton Leo Jabauer. They basically come forward and say, well, is there any other witnesses? Or it's just this witness, this chap who has said his doodlebug doesn't work for him. The case looked like it was going well, and they were done for fraud, but with a hitch. The case dissolved after about 3 or 4 weeks, and all Silas Mason Newton was told to pay was $9,000 or $18,000, and that was it. The case fizzled out. But from the US Air Force's or Air Force Office of Special Intelligence's point of view, which I believe had a hand in it, the case is now discredited. No more Frank Scully's behind the flying saucers. Nobody would touch a story like that for the next 30 years. So I believe there was a hand in it to discredit it. And I believe that was the Air Force Office of Special Intelligence. And the more documentation I require through Freedom of Information Acts, the more you'll know, folks. But at the moment, this case, I'm going to put it back in my imaginary drawer. This case remains open, but I feel like we're getting further and further to what really happened. As I said, I've filed multiple FOIA requests. I'm waiting to hear back. I got my first one back with Paul Benowitz. I'll be doing another video on that very soon. So yeah, I appreciate you watching, folks, and if you've sat through this, thank you. I take my hat off to you. Thank you very much, because I can ramble. But yes, and I look forward to doing my next video for Disclosure of the Third Kind. This has been episode 9, the Aztec UFO Crash. Keep watching those skies, ladies and gentlemen, and like and subscribe.